What if the worst thing that ever happened to you actually turned out to be the best? Grace Wethor was diagnosed with brain cancer, and instead of asking the usual, why me, she turned around and asked, well, what now? Her answer was a total reinvention of how she lives, loves, and understands what really matters in life. Trust me, this is not a sob story. In today's powerful episode, Grace shares her diagnosis and the struggle and the surprising joy that has followed. If you've ever feared that your world was falling apart, Grace will show you today what it means to build something even better from the rubble. Welcome to Stefanie, where every week I'm going to introduce you to the people behind jaw-dropping, life-altering, true stories from all over the world. I'm Stefanie Jones, TV host, storyteller, and your partner in crime for the wildest podcast ride you've ever been on. Each episode, you'll hear shocking stories that'll make you realize we humans are capable of anything. Now, let's spill the tea. Your story is so remarkable. You are literally the definition of a survivor, and you are fascinating as well. Let's take it all back to the very beginning of your story. You were 13 years old, and you get told that you have got an untreatable brain tumor.
Love it.
What on earth is going through your head at that moment? Did you fully understand what was happening, or was it like slow motion, like I'm in a dream right now?
Yeah, we always
say nightmare, I should say. A nightmare.
Yeah, I think I don't totally remember that day in detail, but it had been a long time coming, which was very surprising for a lot of people. I had been in and out of different doctors for almost 6 months by the time they actually discovered the tumor. So my mom knew that there was something wrong with me. She was like, this is not my kid. She wasn't making it to dance practices. She can't make it through a day at school. Like, this is not her. And so I went to countless pediatricians who said I was making it up. I was just a teenager. I was depressed. I heard everything you could possibly hear. And then finally, a doctor listened and did an MRI of my spine and my skull because I was having really bad headaches. And then that led to January 9th of 2015 when they actually discovered the tumor. So we always say, weirdly, there was a slight bit of relief in the diagnosis because we finally figured out what was going on. And it was, as you say, at the time, a nightmare. I have since tried to rebrand that experience into something that is positive for me. But that moment was kind of the catalyst for me moving to Los Angeles. I was told that I had a brainstem glioma, which is a tumor in the pons of the brain, which is the deepest part of the brain at the top of your spinal cord. I was told that there was no trials open for this tumor at the time. Chemotherapy and radiation did not work because of the blood-brain barrier. No doctor would operate on it because it would damage me elsewhere. And I was sent home with an 8% chance of survival for 6 months and told to make memories and drink Gatorade because I was passing out. Yes, I was passing out like multiple times a day. And Gatorade was like the only thing that could get my blood sugar back up. So yeah, it was pretty wild. And I was at, the most sophisticated hospitals in the country, and there was just no answers. 10 years later, I still have the tumor. It is stable, which is unknown why to doctors. A lot of my peers don't have the same outcome, unfortunately. But I feel very grateful for the time that I have had. And thankfully, we are at what I think is history being made, and we're actually starting to see options for these type of tumors. So it's a very exciting time to live in the middle of history unfolding.
When you were only 13 years old, being told you've got probably a 6 month window, a prognosis to live. And like you say, here you are 10 years later, which is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Did they ever continue to, forgive my words here, upgrade your expiration date? Or are they just as confused as everybody else, the doctors?
They're very confused. There was no official upgrade, but it was kind of I got put on what is very dreadedly called the wait and watch protocol. The entire treatment plan is to go home and sit and then come back and get a scan and then go home and sit. And even if your scan progresses, there's nothing that they do. So it's, not the most fun treatment plan. But that treatment plan allowed me to move to Los Angeles and start pursuing my dreams in film and entertainment. So I was 13 and I was kind of, although very sick, living the life a little bit out here in LA and living every single day as if it was the last. And, I think a very traditional thing that a lot of cancer survivors talk about is like 10 years cancer free, you're considered like you're good. And so that was always kind of a goal for me and my family. Although my tumor wasn't gone, I constantly looked forward to this 10-year marker. And I celebrated 10 years this past January, just a month ago. And as I approached it, this has been a big mental kind of excursion for me to explore. I expected some sort of relief at hitting this 10 years. And instead, I was kind of met with almost dread in a way. I have been like, oh, it's going to be kind of taken care of. And then I realized I'm going to wake up on year 10 and I'm going to be in the exact same place that I was 10 years ago. And that was kind of the moment where I realized I had to just, my therapist calls it like radical acceptance. I was like, I just have to accept that this is here and it might be here for the rest of my life. And so I did like a whole Instagram post and I was talking about how since I was 13, social workers were always asking me like, are you afraid to die? Like, let's talk about death, which is a crazy conversation for a 13-year-old to be asked to have. But what I realized later on is the question really should have been like, are you afraid to live and live within this context of what it means to have this potentially for the rest of your life? Because I have been given a new normal of what my daily life looks like. So yeah, it's been a very long 10-year journey. I look forward to what the next 10 years brings me. Wisdom-wise, I don't want to have all this wisdom from this experience, but I'm glad it's giving me something. So yeah, 10 years has been a very big milestone for me.
When other people found out about your diagnosis, did they like treat you any differently? Were they suddenly being like overly nice? Were they walking on eggshells? Or were they really expecting you to, I guess, be the opposite of what you was? So like be really fragile. Like how do people treat you?
Yeah, my LA dreams caused a lot of controversy in my small private Catholic school in Minnesota. Really? I think, I have since started working as a mentor for other young people who have been diagnosed, and I work a lot in legislation, so I hear a lot of family stories. And, a very common theme, I was at a summer camp for kids with brain tumors, and it was like a room full of 70 kids who all have brain tumors. And they asked the question, who lost their friends over this or has experienced bullying? And every single kid raised their hand, which was like the first moment I realized this is not Fault in Our Stars. Like we don't get this like movie cancer experience that you're promised. I think most kids are unfortunately losing their friends because it is a major thing to go through, especially at 13 years old. It also, I think in a middle school causes a lot of drama and hysteria and a lot of crying kids and, people praying over you all the time. And my mom was like, no, let's pluck her out of this. I left school shortly after I was diagnosed and started homeschooling. And my mom was like, she just doesn't need to be around that energy, good or bad. I was running towards something in LA, not running from something, which is what I'm really grateful for during that time. But yeah, no, I think afterwards I received a lot of hate online, which I also was not expecting. It was, I had to like turn off social media for a while because there were so many comments of people being like, I hope it kills you. I hope you, just like everything you could possibly imagine, which made no sense to me. And now as a mentor figure for a lot of kids, I've realized that it is a major problem within the pediatric cancer community, especially for kids who are facing physical ailments from their disease. So it's unfortunately one of those kind of hidden things that you don't expect to come along with it. I think any age you face cancer, a lot of people realize that those people that you think are friends turn into strangers and strangers turn into friends is kind of the saying in the community. So random people stepped up that we never would have expected to be there.
What about on the opposite way? So obviously now that you have surpassed amazingly that 10-year mark, do people now just act like, oh, you're fine?
Yeah, I get that
like,
too.
You're fine. Like, what are you moaning about? Do you get the opposite?
Yeah, I think I mean, it's a battle for myself too, to try to, I definitely normalize what I went through very much. And it's constantly walking this line of, obviously I have to normalize it because I don't know how long this is just might be a part of my life forever. And so I don't want it as something that's holding me back or making me feel like I can't do things. But sometimes you get in those kind of spirally head spaces. So it's still a line that I'm learning to walk to this day. It's like you didn't have to clean your room the first year you had it, but we're on year 10, but you gotta like do your laundry and stuff. And I think even people that have survived and are way beyond their treatment have a very similar outlook. It's constantly, how can we survive in this new normal and not be held back by what we've been through, but also use it to propel us forward.
At what point did you go from being absolutely petrified, like I have had this insane news that I never would have expected, to being like, screw it, I want to live my life, I want it to be the best version of my life? And what moment was it that flipped that switch?
I wish I had more like documentation of those 6 months. It was way before social media, so I don't fully know, and I don't have many pictures from that time. I just do know that I have like one photo. I was diagnosed in January, and by February I was on a set in LA. So I don't know what like I was just visiting. I didn't live here yet, but that did happen. And I had already, been wanting to pursue it, but this moment was kind of like, okay, I had signed for acting actually in Los Angeles with a manager out here like 2 or 3 weeks before I was diagnosed. Like I was like, okay, I'm gonna like go out to LA during the summers and I'm gonna act, and just kind of had all these big plans. And then, a lot of people in LA were like, oh, you kind of have to live here. Like you're not gonna make it if you're not living here. And then I was diagnosed a few weeks later, and I was like, how do I call these managers and tell them that I have a brain tumor now? But yeah, my mom and I'm an only child, and she was a single mom, and we rented an apartment and we moved out here. And her biggest thing that she always said was, you're allowed to be sad, but you aren't allowed to be sad for too long. And so I think that was really helpful, because obviously shutting it down completely emotionally, which I think is a very common thing for parents to need to do in this time of survival, because how can you grapple with losing your child potentially, but also still parenting them? And she never was like, you're not allowed to be sad. She was like, let's be sad, but then you gotta pick up and move on. And I think really allowing me to have that time. A lot of people with this diagnosis, I think, are running from something. And I just got really lucky that I was in this perfect moment to run towards something, which I think really helped my mindset. And then, yeah, I think by that 6 months, I was in LA and I was turning 14 and already kind of doing what I wanted to do. So pretty crazy.
Both you and your mum sound absolutely incredible.
Thank
I
you.
love that your mum did that for you. Yep. Sounds as though her enthusiasm and positivity has nothing but rubbed off on you. She's just supported you no matter what, and literally picked up her life to go fulfill your dreams. Yeah. So that goes to show in your mentality of you saying, which I don't think I've ever heard anyone say ever, you being diagnosed with a brain tumor is one of the best things that's ever happened to you.
Yeah.
Most people would be like, excuse me?
Yeah.
So explain that to me.
Yeah, I think this concept was something that I've been talking about a lot recently. I realized as I started speaking about my story publicly, I was giving like TED Talks, and then I was like on Capitol Hill, and then I was in like a grief group, and like no matter the audience, I realized the response was often the same. It would be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. That is so horrible. That's awful. And I realized that I was like nodding out of formality, but I didn't really agree with them anymore. Somewhere along those 10 years, and I'm not sure when, I had removed the traditionally perceived context of what it meant to have a brain tumor, which is, that's so horrible, and replaced it with my own context, one that offered me joy and passion and community. And somewhere in that timeline, it changed from the worst thing that had happened to me to the best thing that had happened to me. And obviously, I acknowledge my privilege in being able to say that, because a lot of my peers have passed away. And so I'm sure their parents would not agree that this is the best thing that has ever happened to them. But I also know that for the thousands of families that I've met, we all have a very similar perspective of, although we would never want anyone to be in our shoes, we feel oddly sort of grateful that we have gotten to be a part of this community. And I think that feeling is something that a lot of families in the fight grapple with, this weird back and forth. So yeah, I'm extremely grateful for the things that it's taught me. I think I'm allowed to have that, and then also more in the life that I didn't get to live because it happened to me. This is just a very complicated thing to go through.
What is it really like living with incurable cancer? Do you often think about what life could have been? I feel like you living your life, even if there was no cancer, I feel like you would be on this same path because you're so clearly driven and determined.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of, again, both sides. I believe just expedited the life that I probably would have already lived. I was always like, okay, when I turn 18, I'm going to move to LA and go out there and do my own thing. So I think it forced me to look at time in a different way. It made me want to do everything as quickly as I could. I never put things off. And it also made me put aside fear a little bit. It's like, it's not that I'm not afraid to do these things. It's that my want to do them is so much bigger than the fear. And so I just do them. Mm-hmm. As I started exploring this 10-year mindset, I realized, although I look back and I say that I wouldn't change a single thing that I did, I still am trying to hold space for that piece of me that is like, oh, how fun would it have been to just go to college and be in a sorority and have no things to worry about except for my test tomorrow and, you know, the fundraiser coming up next week. Like, I was like, how fun does that sound to just not have to think about anything else? And so I think while simultaneously, you know, mourning this life that could have been so fun and whatever without all of this, looking back with the cards I was dealt, I wouldn't change anything that I've done. Mm-hmm. So yeah, trying to have a little bit of both of those things in that mix and have room for myself to feel that way, but also know that I'm living the life I really feel like I'm destined to live.
Absolutely. You are. Absolutely. Thanks. And I definitely think being given initially that ticking clock has literally, like you say, just go for it. Like, there is no other option. There is no plan B. It's like, just go for it. I think so many people are so afraid and they're so worried what people will think, what people will say, you know, oh, what if XYZ happens? They procrastinate, which is a very normal thing to do. But I think having that bucket attitude, like, I'm just going for it, is so incredible. To have that from such a young age, you've achieved so much. I feel like this is just the tip of your iceberg. You should be really proud of yourself.
Thank you. That means a lot.
What is it like? Because you are a model, you're an actress, you're absolutely gorgeous, Grace.
Thank you.
You literally have been in Vogue. So,
thank you.
What is it like living with an invisible disease? Because to everyone else on the outside, you look healthy, you are glowing, and you fit the perfect image of health. You don't look like a typical cancer patient. Does that make life harder?
Yeah, I think it's given me an immense, probably way too much empathy for the people around me. There's this word that basically, it's called sonder, and it means the realization that every person around us is living a life as vivid and complex as our own. And it's like walking down the street, I don't look like someone who's fighting a brain tumor. If you talk to me in a moment, you don't know the things that I've been through. And I think although brain tumors are kind of one of the most extreme examples, every single person has their worst day of their life. They have the hardest things that they've been through. And it's not really our place to compare those things because it is the worst for that person. And I think that's made me realize that, you know, the person yelling at someone at the grocery store is going through something. The person honking in traffic is going through something. I think it's just given me that knowledge that other people are going through things too. And I try to use my own story to remind myself that other people have their own stories too. You know, nowadays, I think my story is very, very public. So usually when I'm walking into a room, people kind of know what's going on. But back in the day, especially when I was modeling full time and, you know, I was doing Fashion Week every season and traveling the world, and I would push myself way too hard, and no one, you know, really knew what I was going through. So I've learned to kind of have my own boundaries too when it comes to my physical health. So it not only impacts me personally, but also my relationships with other people too.
talking about that physical health element,
Yeah.
obviously you have to take care of yourself, and you're very aware that you know, your life depends on it, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is something you do every single day to stay healthy, what physically and mentally? I know when you said when you were younger and you were first trying to get diagnosed and you're wondering what is going on, and you were so tired and lethargic and feeling awful, how do you stay at like your number one ultimate healthiest capacity so that you can do all the things that you are doing?
For me, the biggest thing is mentally, so you can be in tune with where your body is at. I try to wake up every morning and I have like a glass of hot lemon water. That's like my ritual. I don't drink coffee, so making that hot water in the teapot like gives me that time to be in tune with myself. I think it's so important because, you know, especially chronically ill people, they just kind of like start their levels a little bit lower. So like some days I might start at 50%. And then that means I can only go down so much. Some days I might start at 100 or 99, and then I have that much room. And so I think waking up and having that moment with yourself, like, okay, where is my kind of capacity today? And then that kind of determines how much I can get done that day. And some days I have to push a little bit over just because of my job, but then making sure, okay, so I pushed way too hard this week. Let me make sure I have a week after that to refill everything that I kind of drained.
Do you eat really clean? Are you like super aware of whatever you put into your body? Are you like reading every single label, or are you like, fuck it, I want McDonald's, give me all the ketchup and French fries?
Yeah, no
McDonald's.
McDonald's.
No way.
No McDonald's, but not because of the brain tumor. I just happened to grow up with a yoga mom, so I thankfully grew up eating like at Whole Foods, and she's like, anything from the salad bar you can have. And so I think I just grew up in that space, which was very helpful then when I was diagnosed, because a lot of doctors are now recommending like keto diets and things to help support cancer treatment. So yeah, I guess I've just always kind of eaten very clean. I don't follow like a vegan or anything specific diet, but yeah, no, I've never had McDonald's actually. So
good.
Yeah,
that's good. I think you're a rarity, literally a rarity in that, but I'm glad.
I do enjoy In-N-Out every once in a while. That's what I go to here in California.
That's your treat.
Yeah.
Since your diagnosis, you have lived a life that's been crazier than most people ever will even imagine. I mean, we're talking TED Talks. You've written books. You've spoken at United Nations. What is on your to-do list?
Oh gosh, I think I always say that everything I do lends itself to telling some sort of story. I think this first phase of my life was very brain tumor oriented, and obviously that definitely made me who I am, so I can plan on continuing to tell that story. But with my most recent book, Seven Thompson and the Art of Remembering, it was my first time venturing into a topic that wasn't brain tumor related. As I wrote it more and more, I realized that I accidentally injected a terminally ill kid perspective onto a character that is not terminally ill. And I, realized while doing that, when the book went viral on TikTok and reached an audience way beyond people that knew me personally, I realized that stories could be universally accepted if they had these more, broad topics. And that really made me fall in love with, we can really connect with people everywhere who have been through all different sorts of things, because at the center of it, human emotions are all very similar. And so I plan on telling many more stories. I love writing books, just anything that can help tell a story, and hopefully one person can read it and feel impacted by it and feel like they know these characters and see themselves in these characters. That's what I grew up loving. I would watch movies when I was in the hospital. I would read books, and I really would look at the screen and be like, that's me. That's what I've been trying to say. And no one has said it in those words. So I hope to be able to do for others what others have done for me.
Talking about telling stories, and you mentioning obviously like acting, TV and all of those things, we have to talk about the show that's gone absolutely viral very recently on Netflix, which is Apple Cider Vinegar. It's talking about the very famous Belle Gibson. She's an influencer that faked having brain cancer.
Yeah.
One, have you seen it? And two, what was your reaction to that?
I have seen the show. I watched it. I knew of Belle back in the day. I don't know. First of all, I thought they did a great job creating the show. I don't know what to say. Yeah, I think what I think is really difficult about the brain cancer community is it's a lot of people who have been told that there's nothing, and everyone is very desperate for an answer. I know, we're told not to Google, we're told not to go online, we're told not to read things. And when you're told that, I think all you want to do is do those things. And I know my mom stayed up for months and months. I doubt she slept for a very long time, just researching everything she possibly could. And I think I loved that the show, showed even like these other side characters that were exploring these more traditional routes too. And I think as we come into more of a social media age, doctors are becoming more aware of the things that are online, and they're not just ignoring them how they used to back in the day. They're actually starting to talk about how they can integrate these things in, because when you have no options and you feel like you have no control, giving the patient, I think, sometimes something they can control, like a diet or like vitamins or things like that, I think gives you that little ounce of something that's feeling like I'm actually doing something towards this too. So yeah, where the internet used to be a wild west for people just to say whatever they want, now I think we're actually specifying which of these things are actually going to be helpful. So yeah, it's a horrible story, but I'm glad that we are starting to see more of these patient-oriented kind of treatments being discussed in more traditional medicine settings.
Yeah, I mean, the wellness world can be wild. I think a lot of it sometimes is pure trial and error, right? Back when Belle Gibson was big at the very start of social media, you would have been so young at that point. Yeah. So it would have been probably your mom, like you say, that would have been the one researching and looking and really diving into everything. Have you ever tried something that's been totally insane because you or your mum have read about it online? And please don't try and tell me like you drank like turpentine or something wild. like
Nothing too crazy. Nothing doctors were like, don't do that. Very basic stuff that I think doctors recommended. I did start, there was a specific strain of CBD called Charlotte's Web that was developed for a young girl with seizures. And that personally helped me very much. This was kind of at the beginning of that world conversation, so it wasn't as popular back then. Now it's like you can buy it in the grocery store. But yeah, no, that personally helped me a lot. But I think what's so hard about brain tumors is they don't know what causes brain tumors. They don't know how to cure brain tumors. Every single brain tumor is a different genetic makeup. And so, what works for some of my friends did not work for me. I tried a lot of medications for seizures and I was like falling down the stairs, and we were like, okay, no, not these. And then I'll try something that does not work for my friend at all. And I think that's shown in the fact that, a lot of my friends have passed away, and then a lot of my friends are still living, and we don't know which leads to which. It just kind of feels like a freak accident in one way or the other. So I don't know if I necessarily attribute my survival to any one specific thing medically or holistically. But yeah, no, I think it was the biggest thing for me was accepting where my new normal was and just not pushing myself physically too hard. Like, it was life-changing to be like, okay, take a break. More than, any treatment or concept ever was, just being like, okay, you're at 50% today, no more. Like, sit down. And so although my tumor is the same as it was back in the day, and I'm kind of in the same place medically, I feel like I've learned so much about myself that my life is drastically better. My health is probably better than it was before. So, yeah.
Talking with you, you've mentioned you've made friends within the same community that have had different forms of cancer, and sadly losing some of those. Not everyone has been as lucky. That's got to be pretty hard to deal with. Yeah. How do you cope with that? Because I'm sure you get close to people and like anything could happen at any given time.
Oh, I don't know if I do. I think, when I was diagnosed, I was kind of put in a peer group of 30 kids that had similar tumors to my own. And when I went back for my annual checkup, I found out that I was the only one left in the peer group. And so I think from a very young age, death became something that was a little bit desensitized in the community for a lot of people. So I think it becomes kind of a part of the community. I think the hardest thing for me to come to terms with is the parents and family who are left afterwards. That's the aspect that I have a really hard time with emotionally. Sometimes these kids are very young and they're very, very sick. And so, it's like, okay, it makes sense that, they're in a lot of pain, but the families that are left over, it's like, what are they supposed to do with that pain? And that's like really propelled me to have a lot of conversations about the sibling experience. I don't have any siblings, but these siblings that are bereaved, they barely sometimes talk about it, and they're at school and no one knows that their sibling is even going through this. We did this roundtable conversation in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago where staffers from the White House came and listened, and the president was like, what are some things that siblings need? And siblings are like, we need our own 504 plans at school so we can keep up with our homework. We need time off that's being excused, even though we're not sick. And the family is navigating this illness as much as the actual patient is. And so bereaved families is really a large passion of mine, because I just can't comprehend how they even move through the day, because it's different for everyone. I think, unfortunately, death is a part of this community, and we know that we have friends for a good time, sometimes not a long time. And again, it's just taking every single moment that you have with somebody to the fullest extent. And I think that's what I've not only learned from my own experience, but even more from the people around me.
Most people spend their teenage years being super awkward, like just trying to figure things out. Puberty, first kiss, God knows, first like boyfriend, girlfriend, like life, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot alone. Obviously, when you're talking about these kids and all the things you were saying about them needing their own time, help for them, because even though they're not sick, they're having to deal with all of this and support their families. You were not only going through all of that, all the things that a normal teenager goes through, which is like some of the roughest years of life at the best times, but everything else that you were dealing with medically, mentally, but you also were writing books, you're like on red carpets, you're changing legislation with the president. I mean, it's incredible. Did you ever, Grace, have like a cringy phase when you were like, you look back and you're like, oh my God, or were you just always so fabulously cool from day one?
No,
you came out the womb like, woo, I'm here, let's go.
No, there was a lot of cringe moments. Thankfully, they happened a lot before the internet existed. But yeah, no, I think I always joke, like, I kind of lived a Hannah Montana life for a long time, because I would like be in the hospital during the week, and then I would fly to LA and walk in LA Fashion Week during the weekend. And I did that for a very long time before LA became my full-time life. I was a very awkward child, but I think it was mostly just because I do think I knew what I wanted to do from a very young age. I have some very uncomfortable videos of me, dancing and performing and making films when I was like 11 or 12. And so I think I just knew who I was, and I was unapologetically that. Sometimes I'm like, I wish I could go back to fully 100% not caring what anyone thinks, because I'm sure it leads to some very amazing creativity. But yeah, no, I was not the coolest kid in school, for sure. I was not very popular. But I think that led me to also being an only child. It led to a lot of alone time, just like in the basement of my house. Like, I had like a little photo set up down there, and I was always I would like hot glue clothing together. I didn't know how to sew, so everything was hot glued. So you could not wash it. Yeah, so I think just having so much alone time to foster those things that are, sometimes considered cringy. I just thought they were like fun and passionate. And so it led me into a career where then it was not cringy to do those things, thankfully.
What are some of the most outrageous things that people have said to you, whether it's brain tumor or not, online to your face? Like, what are some of the things you have to deal with? Because you are a public figure, so combining all of these facets together must be really hard to navigate?
Oh gosh, I've heard it all. I think so. I've heard all the crazy, medical opinions, false facts opinions, just you're ugly opinions. But those things online don't necessarily get to me as much as those personal things did back in the day. It was when people from my school, were saying those like, I hope the brain tumor kills you, those kind of things. Those hit me so much harder and still affect me so much more to this day than the things online ever did, because the people online don't know me. Because I think it's easier to disregard strangers online unless everyone comes for me. But right now it's like we're at a good balance, mostly positive. But yeah, I think I'm trying to get to that level of like, this is what I think. And even if you don't agree with me, even if you know me, I feel sure in my decision.
What's one thing that people don't ask that you wish they would?
That's a tricky one. Well, to go back to that kind of 10-year conversation that we were talking about earlier, is like really looking at the side of it of what does it mean to be alive with this instead of what does it mean to be dying from this, which is a conversation that I just found in myself very recently. And so I think dying becomes a large part of the conversation, which is obviously very relevant. But living with this often gets pushed to the side because, like you said earlier, I don't look like someone who's going through this. I'm doing other things. So I look forward to exploring that side of the conversation of being alive with this illness as I move into this new era, I'm calling it.
Talking about living with what you have every day, day to day. When people like, whether it's calling sick or they're just being lazy and they're just like, I've got a cold, I can't come, I'm sick. Are you like, I have a brain tumor, get your ass up and get going? Like, do you ever feel like that? Is there ever a sense of frustration where you're like, I'm still doing this and I'm putting myself out there and I'm exhausted?
I don't have those moments as much as I maybe should. Maybe I should give myself more of those frustrated moments. I mean, there's days that I don't want to get out of bed just because I don't want to. It doesn't have to do with the brain tumor at all. Especially like when you talk about health so much, you've learned to prioritize personal time. And so like, I think some days you need a day where you lay in bed and TikTok. And that to me is as important as somebody who is actually, battling the flu. Like, I really do think that time is so necessary. And if your body and your brain is feeling it, that means that you need it. We live in a world that like, we have way too many things in our brain. Like, I don't think we were supposed to know millions of people and like go all over the place all the time. I feel like it used to be like, okay, you'd wake up and go to the farm all day and then you'd go to bed. And like, now we're like expected to do a million things a day. And so I think everyone needs a TikTok scroll day once in a while. I think my friends will often use that line much more than I do. They're like, Grace has a brain tumor. I have to go do this now.
That was going to be my next question. How often do you use that line when you want to get out of something and you're like, I can't, I've got a brain tumor. I'm done.
Oh, I don't. I think sometimes, maybe once or twice. I think there were some days back in gym class back in the day that I was like, I'm not running 5 miles right now. But not to this day. I think that's what's so great though, is I think I've built a life somehow that I am so passionate about that like my daily life gets me out of bed. So even on days when I don't feel good, I'm like, I get to go and be creative with people that I find really inspirational. So I can't think of the last time I've wanted to call a sick day. So yeah, no, thankfully I live a life that I love for sure.
And I love that your friends use it as their excuse.
My friends use it for sure.
You're there like whole past. You're like, my mum wrote me a sick note. They're like, my friend.
Yeah. My friend has a brain tumor. Yeah, I'm not seeing her today, but it's an emotional toll, so I can't make it. Yeah, no, they use it sometimes for sure.
You just mentioned an emotional toll that some people use to their advantage. You mentioned earlier, sometimes you're in so much pain and they would give you a chart and it was like 1 to 10 and you just was 5 because you're just like numb to it at that point. Yeah. It's just your life, right? Do you think that's having a brain tumor and going through so much and all of the things that come with it have made your emotions more numb? Because you seem very empathetic to others. Are you as empathetic towards yourself?
No, that's my current life lesson. And like we said, I think it's making sure that I acknowledge that although I've come a very long way, a lot of that way was because I learned myself. I have the same illness that I had 10 years ago when I was diagnosed and I could barely get out of bed. And I've learned so much that allows me to like live such a full life, and I've learned how to manage it and what I need to put in place to be able to do that. But I often forget that I still have this thing in my head. And so that's constantly a thing for me that I'm just trying to like, okay, like you deserve that day of not doing anything. Because I'm a workaholic. So I'm like, a day in bed laying around not achieving anything starts to make me anxious. So I'm like, reading a book is productive. That's how I do it. I trick myself. I'm like, okay, you're reading a book, so you're being productive. Or you're like, you know, making a painting, so you're being productive. So that's like something that really helps me. But yeah, no, I think it is hard because it's like you're at the same place as you were, but you're doing so much better because of the things you put in place. So it's constantly just that line of like reminding myself and then not letting it hold me back, and then reminding myself and then not letting me hold it back. And it's like, it changes every week. It'll be a week of like being overly productive and forgetting, and then a week of like dealing with the consequences of it and having headaches. So yeah, back and forth for sure.
What's your take on toxic positivity? Do you ever just want to be like, you know what, I'm just pissed off about this and I don't want to hear everything's gonna be fine?
Yeah, I think I have a lot of people in the community that have taught me that. And I think very similar to my mom's, you can be sad but not for sad too long. My friend Jace, who I mentioned earlier, his mom Lisa, I gave a speech on Capitol Hill and she gave one right after me. And I had said this line, I can't remember what adjective I used, but she went up and then switched the adjective to mad. And she's like, I'm mad that we have to be here all the time. I'm mad that I have to wake up at 6 a.m. and call these families. I'm mad that I need to be here doing this. And I said, I'm tired. I said, I'm tired of fighting for my life every day. I'm tired of having to wake up and do this. And she said, I'm not tired, I'm mad. And I think that realization and that switch was so insightful for me because, you know, being the patient, I'm really tired. And I think admitting that publicly was like something that was very interesting for me. And it's not always the most productive. It's not productive for your body. And it's not productive towards a solution. And I'm overly solution oriented, but I think just the general anger, there's nothing that can be done. You don't know why you're here. It was not something that you did. If it was, you can't undo it. We don't know how we got here. But being mad at the circumstances as a fuel allows you to get up there and do something about it. And I think that is where I really use that frustration and anger. And I think we're not toxically positive when we're on Capitol Hill. We're there to show the reality of what we have to face every single day. I obviously use my story to hopefully inspire others to live their dreams to the best of their ability. But when it comes to inside the community, we are very angry and we are attempting to get a lot of things done. Like, that is the most angry, incredible group of people I've ever seen. So we absolutely have space for, I guess, what people would call negative emotions, but using them as fuel versus using them to mentally spiral, I think is how we get through the day for sure.
Talking about future, Grace, what does that look like for you? Like, what are you chasing that people might not expect, or, you know, have you got any curveballs you're going to throw at us?
I just really, unfortunately, just love exactly what I'm doing, which is like, there's this quote that's like, a man who knows what he wants to be is damned to be it. And I've always felt very connected to that because, you know, while a lot of people, you know, who are teenagers are kind of searching for what they want to do in the world, I knew from the time I was 7 years old, which is absolutely wonderful. You know, not to bring up TikTok again, but I think the internet is such a wonderful place because you're able to participate in things that are so niche and so far from your daily life. Like, there's a girl on TikTok that I just think is a great example. She collects like a special shade of yellow crayons, and like that's all she does. You know, I'm not necessarily interested in yellow crayons, but it's just so niche and so specific, and she's so passionate about it that I'm like, I am your biggest fan. And so I think I have a lot of hobbies, but at the end of the day, it goes back to storytelling. It's like, how can I learn as many things as I can possibly learn to, you know, put them into stories and give that experience to other people too. It's like I have to be in film because I have too many things I want to be. Like I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a horseback rider. You know, that's why I've just fallen in love with film so much, is you have the opportunity to live 1,000 lives. And I think that's what Brain Tumors really taught me, is like, your life is not as concrete as you think it is. I think we wake up and we're like, okay, you have soccer at 8 a.m., then you go to school at 9 a.m., then you finish at 3, then you go to dance class, and then to dinner that's scheduled, and then you go to bed and you do this homework. And it feels so concrete, and it feels like it will never change or go anywhere. And then you wake up one day and you have a brain tumor. And all of that stuff that you think is required goes away in an instant. It's like, okay, this chemistry test is not the end of the world. No one's going to remember it, but I'm crying over it all night long. And I think that realization of how fragile life is, which is absolutely terrifying, but also how moldable our lives are, I want to experience it all. Unfortunately, I have way too many interests and hobbies. So yeah, hopefully one day, astronaut, horseback rider, what else? Maybe some aliens in there, something like that. But yeah, a lot of things I'm planning on exploring for sure.
Grace, I can honestly say that if anyone is going to do it, I know it will be you. Yep. I am like you. I always knew I wanted to be a host. I always knew I wanted to work in television my whole life. There's never been any plan B. That is it. And I've been very lucky that I've literally lived across multiple continents. I've hosted many TV shows, and I love it. And like you mentioned, there's nothing else you'd rather be doing, right? I totally get that. And I do think, like you say, it is a blessing and a curse, because anything else feels so wrong that it's like, you just know innately within you, just don't do it. It just feels wrong. But I can honestly say I didn't have an ounce of the tenacity and the inner courage and that you have had from such a young age. And it's so inspiring. And I think if anyone will go on to achieve all of those things, I do know it will be you, because the fire that burns so strongly within you, it's evident for anyone to see. And the courage and power that you have within yourself is unbelievable. And so I wish you nothing but all the luck and success. And you know what they say, that it's when opportunity and fate collide, and being prepared and all of that. You are all of those things, and you are doing it. And I'm so excited to see where this journey leads you, because you're fascinating. And I'm so happy I got to chat with you today, and I can't wait for the next time.
Love it. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Oh, I've had the best time talking with you, Grace. If you have to leave the podcast today with one little bit of advice for people, what would it be?
You know, you and I have been in this place where we've known what we wanted to do our whole lives, but I think there's so much excitement and freedom in not knowing what you want to do. I talk about, this moment a lot. When I was diagnosed, I was kind of like put back to ground zero. I had none of these things that I thought were required anymore. And it allowed me to start from scratch with my life, which I think is a really incredible moment. And although brain tumors is a very extreme example and not everyone will experience that ground zero moment can come from a lot of different places. It can come from a family death. It can come from a divorce. It can come from having a child. It can come from having a chronic illness. Like, everyone most likely experiences this kind of ground zero moment in their life at least once, where they're forced to rebuild a new experience. And I think if you don't know exactly what you want to be doing, you have an incredible opportunity to get to know yourself. Not knowing what you want to do or what is your true authentic self is such an exciting opportunity to explore so many things. And that's what my mom and I's, motto always was when we first moved out here, is like, every day is an adventure. We're just going to try something. It doesn't need to turn into anything. It doesn't need to be rewarding. It might cost us, $20 or whatever, but we're just going to give it a try. And that led to so many incredible opportunities. So don't be afraid to try things. And if you don't know what you want to be exactly yet, you've got a long time to figure it out.
I love that. Grace, you're amazing. Thank you.
Grace teaches us all that sometimes the scariest moments are the ones that crack us wide open and really let the light in. She doesn't glamorize her illness, but she refuses to let it steal her joy. Her voice is steady and her spirit is super fierce. And if she can face death and come back laughing, loving, and thriving, maybe it inspires us all to start living a little bit braver too. If you liked today's episode, don't forget to share it with your besties, give it a like, subscribe so you never miss out, and I'll be back next week.